All right, so welcome back to the meeting, and it's now reconvened. And I have the first item that, well, everyone's here except for James, is, as you have heard, is zooming into the meeting. So the first item is, I thought there was a resolution to include a supplementary report first. So there is a resolution to consider first, which is that the report be received and considered at the council, which is the representation review, additional responses to submissions and updated maps. So I've moved that. Do I have a seconder for that? Jimmy Chen. Any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. The now, we've got I'm just trying to figure out the best way to do this. So the next item for us to do in terms of the meeting itself is to suspend standing orders to enable for a full debate on the issues. So I'm going to move that we pursuant to Standing Order 3.5, suspend the following standing orders: 17.5, 17.6, 18.1, 18.8 and 18.9. So do I have a seconder for that suspension? Mike, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And now we move to the representation review, additional responses, and I think it's at this point that I hand over to John Fussell. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Leanne. Thank you, councillors. We are here today to request direction from the council to prepare the final proposal, which will be presented to a council meeting on the 18th of June 2021. The recommendations that accompany a report on the agenda cover the direction that we are seeking. More particularly, we have provided, as a result of councillor inquiries, two options to address the inner east of Christchurch, the Phillipstown, Charleston area, to allow councillors to consider their response, and we would like a direction on which of these options are preferable. Really, that's about all that we have to say. Other than that, we are here to answer any questions, provide additional information, and so forth.
Okay, so there's a number of recommendations that we'll need to go through, but I'm just struggling with the process. So are we do we literally just deal with these original the main ones first, and just one by one, and then come back to that, or?
So the recommendations have been grouped together on screen. So
yeah.
Exactly what you've said, Leanne. It might be best just to work through them. So it starts with by confirming the number of councillors and the mayor.
Yep.
Okay. So okay. So the first what I'm do we want to? I mean, I don't want to have like 150 debates. So if we can try and resolve this into the areas of debate, so that we can deal with the debatable issues, and then the overarching direction to staff. So let's have a look. If we can perhaps, let's do what I consider is likely to be relatively uncontroversial. It'll be, basically for or against, which is the initial proposal that the Christchurch City Council comprise a mayor and 16 councillors, and reject submissions to amend the proposal to have fewer than 16 councillors, reject the submissions to amend the proposal to have more than 16 councillors, including the proposal for 2 councillors for Banks Peninsula. So, we could, I don't know whether people want to. That'll be his call coming in for him. I don't know.
Shades of Carol Ballette, isn't it?
I'm having a little bit of blank as to what is the best way to propose this.
Take them in the order as they're listed in order form.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking that the composition of council, the members elected by wards, there's an amendment to the following one. So if we do the first and the second one, so I'll move the first and the second, which is confirming the initial proposal and confirming the initial proposal that members of the Christchurch City Council, other than the mayor, continue to be elected by the electors of wards. Oh, no, that's the amendment. That's where the amendment goes. So, so I will move the
Composition
the
of the council.
confirming of the initial proposal that the council comprise a mayor and 16 councillors. Do I have a seconder for that? Andrew, is there any discussion? I don't.
What I was just unclear about is whether you were going to have one debate at the end and you can touch on all the things that you want to touch on. Yeah. Yeah, but it's up to you. Well, exactly. And that's really what I'm saying, is however she wants to run it, I'm fine with that.
The only thing that really staff haven't... Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Leanne. I'm used to school. As staff, given the elected member feedback to date, we probably believe that items 2 and 5 will engender more debate. The others maybe not quite so much. I don't know if that's helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just that some councillors want to obviously make the case for reducing the number of councillors. So is that better to have that debate now, or is it better to have that debate?
Because they kind of cascade through.
Yeah.
It's almost better to do them in the order, because if you
not
decide to change...
not everyone needs to debate.
No.
Yeah.
Well, could I
issue.
hope,
All right.
Leanne,
So-
can I make life easier then with this?
Yeah.
Just, and I know whether you're wanting to offer debate or anything for that now, I'm trying to get a sneaky one debate in the sense that, look, you know how I felt about it, so I'm going to vote against it, but there's no point to continue on. Then I can work constructively on what the rest of the resolutions are, because it's obviously going to pass.
But feel free to state the case, because I think this is the moment to state the case for the alternative position.
I also understand there's a lot of other things on here and don't want to hold a meeting up for that purpose.
Okay.
Leanne, it'll be a lot easier for staff if we go through in numerical order, one by one.
Okay. Right. Sarah?
I just don't know if people have questions based on the other
Sorry.
options that have been put up.
We've got okay. Sorry.
If we just did like a normal meeting, did questions and then the debate and then put them one by one,
Yeah,
and then
I
did we
know.
just have one debate?
Sorry, I wasn't aware that people had questions on the number of councillors. All right, I'll start again. Are there any questions on number 1? Is there any debate on number 1? I will put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
That's carried.
Sam's vote's under.
Oh,
Oh,
and
right.
the no
Recorded
votes are recorded as Sam, Catherine, and James. Off. And Mike.
And
Sorry, look, can people please, if they, I have just been asked by staff that it is easier for them to get advice. The final debate is coming back to council. So the final discussion will be on the, what is it? 18th of June. And that's when the final debate is held, and that then, but we have to give the staff direction today as to what the content of that paper will be, because there is no opportunity to change it at that point. It has to be notified within a particular time frame.
14 days.
We will certainly reflect back to central government that this act needs changing. The process is not a good process, and the timeframes are ridiculous. And I just want to acknowledge how hard the staff have worked to try and respond to the needs of both those who the submitters, but also to, you know, councillors that have a range of different views on this matter. So I acknowledge you for the work that you've done. But so that's the first item. If you want to record an abstention in the meantime until we get to the final vote on the 18th, then that's fine as well. But I'm happy to have it recorded against.
I'll abstain for Sarah.
2 abstentions?
Yeah.
Right.
But have you recorded my vote?
Yes,
against?
your vote is against,
you.
and so's Catherine, and so's Sam. Right. The second item is to confirm the initial proposal that members of Christchurch City Council, other than Mayor, continue to be elected by the electors of wards, rejects the submissions for at-large elections, and rejects the submissions for multi-member wards. So I've got to get a mover and a seconder first. So I will move that, and seconded by Tim Scandrett. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? I thought this is.
So 2 is fine.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. So the amendment goes with the next one. Okay. So I will put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. So that's Sarah and Mike. That's carried. And now we move to single member wards. Confirms its initial proposal that the city continues to be divided into 16 wards, with the electors of each ward electing 1 member. I'll move that. Seconded by Anne Galloway. And I understand there's an amendment. And the amendment is to amend the initial proposal so that the city is divided into 6 wards as per the proposed community board configurations, with electors of each ward electing 3 councillors, apart from Banks Peninsula, who will elect 1 councillor. Are there any questions for staff on either the amendment or the proposition? No? So I'll open it up for... oh no, the amendment's been moved and seconded. Have you got that? Yep. And I'll open it up for debate. What? Sorry? Right. Sarah.
Thank you. We have a huge opportunity today if we are brave enough to take it. We talk about encouraging participation, of increasing candidate diversity and voter turnout, and here is our chance to put our words into action. The majority of the people sitting around this table today were first elected in large multi-member wards, whether to council or community board. And let's remember that the proposal is not to go back to the system we had. It did have some issues. We are proposing to keep community board members elected in the current wards, to be the super local voice as we at council focus on more of the big picture, the policy and the direction for the city. When it comes to urban centres across the country, we are increasingly becoming a conservative outlier. Let's embrace democracy, encourage candidates to stand and give voters more choice. It is uncomfortable and counterintuitive to encourage people to stand against us, but we are not here for ourselves. We are public servants and our job is to do what is best for the people of the city. With 3 councillors elected across a community board area, we would have more candidates likely to run. In the old system with multi-member wards, we had 3.9 candidates per seat on average. That's now dropped to 2.6. We would move back towards gender equality as the stats clearly showed how much of a fall we have had since the current system was introduced. We would have greater representation of the diverse people of the city. We measure gender equality, but other measures of diversity will all be enhanced as residents vote for a group of 3 councillors and don't have to choose between male and female, gay and straight, Māori and Pākehā. They would get to choose all 3. And of those submitters that mentioned multi-member wards, over 2/3 were in favour. We've had a clear analysis of how single councillor wards have impacted gender equality and candidate numbers, but there's been no actual evidence shown to us to counter it, only anecdote. Let's stop worrying about what might go wrong and start being excited about what might go right. More participation by candidates and by voters, and by more people having their say in what happens in Otatahi. The main concern I've heard from colleagues is that higher vote turnout of wealthier wards could see some areas not represented by someone from that area, as it sometimes did in the past. But that happens now, as we do not have to live in the ward we represent, and we have clear examples in the last 2 elections. It is also mitigated by having board members elected in smaller areas still. And let's remember that in its first fully democratic election for a decade, ECAN had large multi-member wards in Christchurch. Look at the Christchurch Central constituency, made up of Riccarton, Fendalton, Central and Linwood, who voted in representatives from Woolston and Shirley. Let's give voters more credit than simply assuming they vote for their own. The most progressive and democratic electoral system is for multi-member wards with STV. We are not able to make both of these decisions at the same time, but that should not stop us making them separately. We have this opportunity. Let's be brave and let's say yes.
Anyone else? Andrew?
Unsurprisingly, I support the smaller single-member wards on the basis that they keep democracy closest to the people, because they increase the chance of a person actually knowing their councillor personally, because they know them within their community, because they increase the chances of a person from within that community or community of interest being elected to represent that particular community, quite possibly people who are already community leaders or who are well known within that community. A smaller ward makes running as a candidate more affordable and more realistic for a wider range of people. A larger ward inevitably requires greater resources and more time to run an effective election campaign because it's an area 3 times the size that's covered. So I don't really see how either of those facts makes it easier to run for election. The larger the ward, the more likely it is that those that are already well known or those that have got the resources to run a campaign will get elected, and the harder it'll be for someone who's currently well known in just one part of that larger area for doing good work or being a community leader to actually get elected. This could easily be translated into people that are already well known or well resourced getting elected because of name recognition and those resources, rather than others who may in fact be more effective and better connected representatives. It also means that each ward gets its own representative elected by and accountable to that particular community. With one councillor, it's pretty obvious whether they're doing their job or not. With 3 people, those people could easily hide behind each other. The point has already been made that in a ward 3 times the size, there's a chance that councillors could all get elected from one part of that ward, all from Fendalton, none from Waimari and none from Harewood, leaving parts of the ward with no councillor who really understands or has any real connection with those other communities at all. This is the same reason I also favour the subdivisions for the Banks Peninsula Community Board. Otherwise, all the community board members could easily be elected from Littleton with no affinity with, relationship with, or indeed knowledge of Akaroa at all. And the same theory works in this case.
So I believe in keeping democracy close to the people, residents being represented by someone who actually knows their community, and I'll therefore continue to support the single member wards option that we put forward in the initial proposal, and I won't be supporting this particular amendment.
James and
Thanks. I'll be brief on this. I would have happily supported the multi-member wards if the overall number of councillors was to go down. So I simply don't feel that anything is being solved by moving to multi-member wards whilst we still retain 17 people around the council table.
Anne?
I'm not sure how we can do the best for our residents if we are expected to be knowledgeable across 3 distinct and unique communities within one ward. My ward, I live in Horswell, and I shop, and I often meet my neighbours, and I'm able to keep in touch with community groups and with the needs of my local residents who are my neighbours. And I can get involved at a much deeper level. I don't believe I could have the same level of involvement or effectiveness if that was spread across 3 distinct wards. So I'm very much in support of having a single member ward.
Tim?
Thank you. Being a middle-aged Pākehā male, according to some around the table, it's amazing I'm even here. But the fact that I am here is because I work bloody hard for my community. I know them well, and I am accountable to them. So I absolutely support the ward system. Thank you.
Jimmy?
Because we have a consultation, but in my ward, I'm a home-based ward, particularly the community board and community. Kind of unanimous support is a kind of single word, the kind of elected members, So because they're aware who is there, the local council, who is there, the local community board members is quite clearly. But myself experience, even I pass through all those 2 different words. But regarding the campaign, still the single word is, is less the campaign because it's a huge war, multi kind of war. Probably you need to spend much time for the campaign, but actually, campaign just procedure. Actually, to be the good service, that's most of the important and take into account to let your the kind of residents, your community recognize, you are there, the local council, you are there, the local community board member. Just keep the simple, keep it simple. So I prefer the just single one. Yeah.
Pauline?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I was first elected in a multi-member ward, but in those days it was only 2 wards together. But prior to that, one of those wards of Papanui had historically had both elected members from that one area in Papanui for many years, many elections actually. And consequently, the people of Shirley never had any representation, and in fact some of those councillors never stepped foot in there. So from a first-hand experience I can see the perverse outcome of multi-member wards, particularly when we're looking at now having 3 together. They're very large areas, as Jimmy's just stated. And I really believe in localism. I believe in councillors. We're a lucky country compared to the rest of the world. Elected members here from both government and councils are really accessible to people and vice versa. They know who their representatives are, and we're very accessible, and I really prefer to retain that because I think it works well and it's important, and communities are important. And when I shop in my community, I shop in my ward, I talk to people there. At large, I wouldn't probably shop way up the top of Papanui. So I'll be supporting this option today.
Before I get Mike to wrap up, I'll just say I'm the only one that's elected at large, and so you'd say that I don't have a specific interest in this as an issue. I would support this if we had STV, and the reason is that multi-member wards are ideally suited for an STV option. And the reason that is the case is that because of the system of the votes transferring to someone else, you start to get a better build of a council that's way more representative of the city as a whole. And the advantage of having 3 people, I've heard people say, and I do really respect the local hard work and the graft that goes into earning your right to represent a community. Absolutely. I had that as a Member of Parliament and wouldn't like that multi-member role. I really respect the individual relationship with communities. But you can build that relationship in conjunction with other councillors. But I'm not going to vote for it this time because we don't have STP, and I think it would be a perverse outcome in terms of first past the post. So that's why I don't support that amendment. Mike?
Just trying to think what to say without trying to stay respectful for my colleagues, because all I've actually heard around the table mostly is I. When we should be actually looking at the people we represent. And it's clear from some of the examples that have been given in terms of election expenses, who gets voted in. You're not actually looking at proper data and evidence that shows that actually you're wrong in what you're saying. I don't think you give the people of your wards, whether it be one or three, enough credit to actually vote in the people that best represents their view. I don't think you see actually the actual added benefits of having more than one councillor in a combined constituency that actually helps not just the people but yourself deliver better results. It's a shame. Look, this was an expected outcome. When I first raised this at the start for the consultation, it was obviously completely voted down, and it's a shame. And I guess this is why we see the problem of actually having this type of vote in this environment, because we always have a bias no matter what we do, and we're always going to vote with the bias. Like, yeah, Tim, you work hard, so why wouldn't you get voted if you had 3 wards? And actually having 2 other people with you doesn't mean you're not going to work any less hard. You're still going to work for the people that voted you in. And it's just how it works. I don't think we can compare what happened with the 2004 changes. That was totally different when it dropped to 24 to 12. I agree that was the wrong outcome, and it did have perverse outcomes, but we're not talking about this. We're not decreasing the amount of councillors. We're actually keeping the councillors at the same level, and what we're trying to do is actually add a little bit more accountability and a little bit more value to the people that we're actually here to represent. I personally would have loved to be stood for election over Papanui Innes and potentially the Central Ward, and I would do my best to represent all those people equally. So look, it's a shame that actually no one else sees the added benefit in this. It is actually really disappointing. I knew this was going to be the outcome, but it's important to raise this amendment. I do hope actually this gets appealed. And an independent authority actually makes the right decision to actually give better representation.
Thank you. I'll put the amendment first. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That is lost. Division.
Councillor Templeton. Councillor McClellan? No. Councillor McDonald?
No.
Councillor Johansson? No. Councillor Galloway? No. Councillor Daniels?
Yes.
Councillor Coker?
No.
Councillor Chen?
No.
The Mayor?
No.
Councillor Scandrick?
No.
Councillor Major? No. Councillor Kewen?
No.
Councillor Goff?
No.
Councillor Davidson?
No.
Councillor Cotter?
No.
Councillor Chu? No. Councillor Turner?
No.
So that's 3.
Thank you. That's lost. And I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Can I just record Templeton, Davidson and Daniels as opposed?
All right.
The resolution.
The resolution. 3.
Confirming. Thank you. Thank you. Number 4, I will move the adoption of the names of the wards. Do I have a seconder for that? Jimmy Chen. Any questions? Any debate? I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And abstention,
Sarah,
Mike and Sarah. Setting ward boundaries. So, this is where it gets difficult. So, help me through this one.
So, attached to the report, there are two options. So we have an option 1, which is attachment A, and we have an option 2, which is attachment B. So if you look at them together, there's an overview map for each, and then it goes down to the ward level. So what we're looking for in this, we've rather than recommending an option, because obviously it's there's differing views, what we would need council to do is eliminate one of those, or essentially move one of the options.
I'm happy to move the option A as well. Attachment A, I should say, option 1.
And I'll second Jake's.
Oh, hang on, I've already moved it.
Yeah. Well, who seconded it? No, it's too late. I've got a mover and a seconder. Well,
Oh, whatever.
Caramel shoes.
I heard a mover and a seconder on the second one. The second one, not I heard a mover of the first one. Well, look, I mean, it's neither here nor there. Look, okay, I don't care. Yanni, you can have your way on this. I will accept that it has been moved by Yanni Johansson and seconded by Melanie Coker. And I'm going to take a foreshadowed motion that is moved by Jake McClellan, seconded Sam McDonald. So the motion that we have in front of us is to have the second of these options. It's option B, attachment B. And are there any questions? Yanni, you have a question?
Yeah, just a question for staff in terms of the two options. Which one do you think better reflects the community submissions?
We will do a joint reply. The option A reflects the fact that the community of Phillipstown asked, firstly, to be included in one ward. Secondly, if that was the case, to be attached to the Linwood ward. So that reflects their primary request, but not their secondary request. So we've got one of two, and it was their primary. Chris, would you like to have anything else?
No, I think that covers it.
Yeah.
And I think with option 2, it still has from memory, a split to the north of Phillipstown, which is its current boundary anyway, as is currently set.
Yeah, and we are taking care to be objective rather than offering a personal or a staff viewpoint.
So does attachment B not provide for all of Phillipstown to be in one ward as they requested?
No.
No.
Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought that it did. So it doesn't.
It does.
It actually doesn't achieve the objective that the community asked us to achieve.
Phillipstown and Charleston.
Sorry,
It
Charleston
does.
isn't Phillipstown.
Well, it all depends on where your boundary of Phillipstown is. Traditionally, the historic area has gone across Ferry Road to Charleston.
Yeah, I understand that.
And goes
That's
to
not
Harris
the
Street.
question that was asked. The question was the Phillipstown community asked to be in one ward. So the advantage of the attachment A is that it meets the first objective. The second objective is being in the Linwood ward, which it doesn't meet. And with the second one, it doesn't meet the first objective, which was to be in one ward. It does mean that what is in one ward is in the Linwood ward. Well, that's the choice. Okay, that's clear.
Challenge.
Thank you. Any further questions?
So, sorry, just in regards to the submissions, the concern was raised. There were a number of submitters, as I read it, that were concerned that if they were put in the central ward as proposed and with Papanui Innes, they didn't want to be within that community board area. So how much weight do you give to the proposed community board structure when you've considered those local submissions, that they look east rather than to the north?
I feel like that's a difficult one for us to offer an opinion, because it would be you considering the submissions and which way you would weight, how much how you weigh them up.
Yeah, we've tried to offer analysis and advice on the submissions. The forum for deciding which submissions to accept or reject or weight are really yourself rather than us. In the process, we've.
Thank you. I mean, I don't want to put staff in a difficult position.
No, that's fair enough. Can I just get clear though what your boundary of Phillipstown is?
I need to. Ashley, are you happy to pop over?
This is not a staff boundary. This is the boundary for Phillipstown. So what is the boundary?
Unfortunately, our lead researcher is on well-earned annual leave. In discussing this with her, she used the accustomed boundaries, and they are reflected in option A. If you notice, the community pointed out that Phillipstown extended a little east of Aldwins, and so that's a bit of a change there from the initial proposal.
Jimmy, you have a question?
Yeah. But actually, how many households, affected by either A or B? How many households?
Thousands.
Yeah, we've stayed.
It's a big area of town.
Bigger area.
Yeah.
But except the Linwood and the Central have affected by this one, A and B. How about the other ward?
So that's in your attachment C in the report. So it's got the flow-on effects there. So
complicated, yes.
Let me go to that.
You've got them both open. It's literally just.
They've done this so that there are changes at the top end either way. So whether a ward comes down or whether a ward goes up, but it's at the margins.
The changes are demonstrated by the colour coding on the two options.
So option 2 does lead to some other changes which are listed under the option 2. So the area bounded by Pages Road, Anzac Drive, Bexley Road, Breezes Road, Cuthberts Road, and Shuttle Drive is retained in the Bird Ward, and to keep the population of the Central Ward within plus or minus 10%. The area bounded by Avon River, McBratney's Road, Banks Ave, North Parade, Shirley Road, Hills Road, Whitmore Street, it goes on, is moved into the Central Ward. So that's attached in the report, Denny.
Yeah. Visually, it's demonstrated on the maps.
Right. So no more questions. I'll open it up for debate. Yanni?
Answers some of the submissions that came in. Charleston does not have any socio-economic, cultural, or geographic connections with the supposed northern wards that we would have to join. Our area is seen as eastern, and we've always felt connected with the eastern hills, but not the northern parts. For instance, the high schools that are in this area take children from the eastern parts of Christchurch. There's other submissions as well. Linwood has no connection to North Christchurch and identifies more with Phillipstown, who will lose more than Spencerville. The people of Linwood do not travel to the other side of the city centre, so asking them to identify with people from the northeast corner and Waimak districts is ridiculous. Another submission from the Charleston residents group. Charleston area has been considered to go to northwest parts of the city. And if the changes happen as mentioned, we would be under the Innes Ward, which we have no connection. We have had a long association with the Linwood Central Heathcote Community Board and would not like to see it discontinued. We will lose our identity and ability to deal with board members who we know. Our discussion with Tessa Zahn, it appears that if the changes happened, our nearest boardroom would be New Brighton, which has no service staff, so we'd have to go to the Palms for anything required, such as photocopying. Once again, the east side of the city is being disregarded. There's a number of submissions that we've had where people talk about what would happen. Another one, Linwood is better associated with the existing Heathcote and Central wards rather than added to coastal Burwood. I live in Woolston and see the diversity of the Linwood Central Heathcote Community Board area is actually a good thing. We're served by the same secondary school. More important now that zones have come in and have worked in community development throughout this area with links between the communities along the corridor of Ferry Road and Linwood Ave Humphreys Drive main road. That corridors are really valid and worthy of being kept together at a governance level. So effectively, I think staff have done an excellent job coming up with option 2 or option B, because the reality is that if you look at what the submitters have actually said, it does several things to respond. It keeps Phillipstown and Charleston together. That is what traditionally has been known as the wider Phillipstown area. In fact, Charleston was a relatively recent invention. Traditionally, Ferry Road has been the corridor that has connected people rather than a corridor that has divided people. It keeps Te Waka Inua School within the same ward as the communities it caters to when it was merged with the Phillipstown School at its Woolston site. This is the key area that the Phillipstown School went to. The other thing is it's less disruptive than other models, and I strongly disagree with the comment that the option A includes keeping Phillipstown together. Traditionally, the boundary of the inner city east in Phillipstown has been Harrow and Chewham Street because there's some industrial that has divided it. So, you know, I don't think it's a fair representation to say that option A keeps Phillipstown together within one ward. And I personally think there's a much stronger argument for option B that keeps Charleston and Phillipstown as the historic Phillipstown district together. So, and the final point I would make is that accepting that the community board proposal as it's been planned goes ahead, then this actually, the option 2 or option B retains much better community coherence within the changed community board structure, which again better reflects the submitters' concerns that the focus should be to the east rather than to the north. So I really encourage you to please read the submissions and see what people have said from this area. There is overwhelming evidence from the submitters or overwhelming views and opinions that support option 2 quite strongly. And the idea of dividing a community that has already lost its stadium, lost its school, and is losing its community board even further is not something I would support, which is why I've moved that option 2 be addressed. It is much less disruptive and makes a lot more sense in terms of community of interest.
I'm just going to make one comment because I'm just going to enter into the debate, but really to say that I'm not entering into the debate other than to thank Councillor Johansson for his commentary then, because I think in reading out the submissions, and we have read the submissions and they're very much at front of mind, and recognising also that there is an appeal process that takes this in front of the Local Government Commission. So if we haven't got it, you know, in a state that is acceptable from an independent point of view, it will be resolved there. So I take great comfort from that. But the real thing that you highlighted in each one of the ones that you read out is the sadness at losing the one community board that got lost in the revision, which is really required in order to get equality of size between the community board areas. And a lot of people just don't realise that the Remuneration Authority, and I know we're not allowed to take pay into account, and I'm not, but they do treat size differently when it comes to community boards. So different size community boards, no matter how hard the chair works, no matter how hard all of the community board members work, if you're only representing 2 wards, then there is a distinct disadvantage. And we see that played out in Banks Peninsula as well, with a smaller population. I don't agree with population-based remuneration, and I know we can't take it into account, and I'm not taking it into account. But what I'm saying is that one community board got lost, and staff have tried to come up with a couple of options to resolve that. I have a great sympathy for the Phillipstown Woolston connection with Te Waka Inua. I really do, because that was the trade-off for a school that didn't want to close and probably shouldn't have closed. in my opinion. But so thank you, Yanni, for the way that you presented your argument today. Jake.
I thank you to my colleague as well for presenting that submission. I think that what that submission really speaks to is the feeling of despair over a community board that's been disbanded. It doesn't really speak so much to clumping communities that are adjacent to one another and how appropriate that is. The reality of it is that this combines the Linwood Village with Phillipstown. I've lived in both of these areas during my teenage and childhood years, and they're essentially the same community. It's important also to note that although it's called Linwood Ward, it really is the Woolston Ward, and Phillipstown is undeniably an inner city urban community that has high transients, a high connection to the CBD. That's exactly the same as Linwood Village. So I see them not so much as communities of like, but actually part of the same community that shouldn't be divided by Chilham Street. And while I am also sad to see the LCH board go, it's very easy to take a community board and pick the two furthest extremes of geographically of that community board and then say there's no commonality. That's the case of no matter which community board you pick. On top of that, obviously option 1, or attachment A as it's called, is the simplest change we can make today in a rep review process that has had quite a lot of changes, and I think now is the time just to get on with it, and it's also option 1 represents the smallest change to what we consulted on to the central ward as well. And we haven't actually tested with the public what such drastic changes to the central ward would mean.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, it is really sad. That was the word I was going to use. I still will. I was first elected to the Hagley Ferrymead Community Board and chaired that for 3 years, stretching from the CBD in Hagley Park out to Taylor's Mistake. And while we call that 2 wards now, it's actually very different, very little different from what would be a 3 ward, one just with sort of Opawa Waltham added at the moment. And the communities that Councillor Johansson talks about are really vulnerable, and we need to do better by them. And at the moment, we organise our organisation around what are pretty arbitrary electoral boundaries that we draw on a map. And actually, I think that probably as an organisation, we can do better than that. We do not have to organise where our governance teams work around electoral boundaries. We can organise them around those communities of interest better in a way and make sure that those communities still meet and still are well supported by the same members of a governance team. As part of this, an inevitable restructure will happen around the loss of the Linwood Central Heathcote Community Board. We have an enormous wealth of experience in our governance team and staff members who know those communities really well. And we need to make sure that while there will be some efficiencies, actually we still need the same number of governance staff on the ground. And we need to make sure that we capture those ones who know those communities really well, so that when it looks like their jobs are disappearing, they actually have a reason to stick around. We need to do better by these communities. We need to not focus the rest of the organisation on electoral boundaries that are purely drawn up for getting elected representatives. And I'd like to see us focus on governance across that Linwood, Phillipstown, Woolston, Charleston area, even when it's split across several community boards. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, well, I will put the motion. This is, no, it's not an amendment. This is the motion. The motion is, we have a foreshadowed motion that I will put immediately should that one be, should this one fail, but if it succeeds, that is the motion. So I will put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. No. That's lost, and a division.
Councillor McDonald?
No.
Councillor Johansson? Yes. Councillor Galloway? Councillor Daniels?
No.
Councillor Coker? Yes. Councillor Chen?
Yes.
The Mayor?
Oh, I hate doing this. I'm going to abstain. Sorry.
Councillor Scandrett?
No.
Councillor Major? No. Councillor Keown? No. Councillor Goff?
No.
Councillor Davidson? No. Councillor Cotter? No. Councillor Chen? Oh, sorry, Councillor Chu?
You need to wear glasses.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Chu? Councillor Turner?
No.
Three, 13 and 1 abstained.
Thank you. That's lost. I will put the what do you call it? Foreshadowed motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And we'll just record the no votes as councillors Johansson and Coker and Aaron Keown. Is that right? Sorry? Yeah. That's all right. It's my pleasure. I won't worry with an abstention on the last one because there's no point. Right. Now we move on to the next one, which is community of interest. Amends the initial proposal to reflect the communities of interest for each ward as set out in attachment A. All right, so I will, who would like to move? Oh, I'll move that. That's probably easier if I just move them all. Look for a seconder. Jake, any questions? Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. It's carried. Councillor Johansson recorded no. And abstentions with...
Sarah.
Are you a no or a abstention? Okay. Are you abstentions all the way through? Yeah. Hey?
Apart from the last
Apart from
one.
the last one. Okay. Population of wards. I'll move that we amend the initial proposal to reflect that in accordance with Section 19V2 of the Local Electoral Act, the population that each member represents is within the range of plus or minus 10%, and that only the representation of the Banks Peninsula ward falls outside the stipulated range for fair representation. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Yeah, James Goff. Why not? Any questions? Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried.
Abstain.
And abstentions. Sorry, I'll just... Banks Peninsula is an isolated community. This is just confirming the initial proposal. I'll move that. Seconded by Andrew Turner. Any questions? Yanni?
Just in response to the submissions, a number of submitters raised, there was a feeling that for Akaroa, that was seen as rural in the wider bays, but that Littleton was seen as more of an urban area. What was the response to that in terms of consideration?
The submissions were the majority of submissions were that Banks Peninsula was Banks Peninsula. There were very few submissions that reference the point that you're making, Yanni. So I don't think it's a fair question of staff.
Submissions.
Some submitters did raise it. I remember them saying that, and some of them raised it in response to questions that were asked, that Littleton was different. But the majority of submissions, from what I've read and remember people saying, was very clear that it was Banks Peninsula, Banks Peninsula.
So, but this isn't a majority thing. It's just... So what I was trying to understand is, could you separate, is there any possibility of separating out Littleton from the rest of the peninsula? So what would that do for population or acceptability in terms of communities of interest?
Well, there is the possibility of doing that. The initial proposal didn't propose that, and the feedback we don't believe has supported that. The population effects, we'd have to get back to you and look at mesh blocks and populations. So we wouldn't be in a position to answer that now.
But ultimately, it would mean that population ratio was a lot worse than what's currently being proposed, which would be less likely to get consent through the Local Government Commission, I would have thought.
I'm sure the matter will be, I mean, it was thoroughly debated at the Local Government Commission. I recall it. I mean, I presented to the Local Government Commission the last time. It won't be a foregone conclusion.
No, I understand that. If you go back and read the reorganisation research that was done, one of the compelling reasons put forward was the fact that Littleton had become much more part of the urban fabric of Christchurch, and that was the justification for it.
The reorganisation or the last Local Government Commission consideration of our representation?
No, this was
review.
the reorganisation.
Yes,
with the
don't
peninsula.
go back in history, Yanni. Right. We're dealing with the current
I understand it's the current
proposal
one.
that we went out with, and there is no weight of submission that would back up a late change to the proposal. It will go in front of the Local Government Commission. Let's leave it where it is. Right, so I've got a mover and a seconder. I'll open it up for debate. Andrew.
Thank you, and I will make some comments on this, just really acknowledging the large number of submissions that related to this particular issue, and in fact reflecting on a similar discussion that happened the last time we did a representation review as well. It's worth noting that not all of those submissions came from Banks Peninsula. There were submissions from others that supported Banks Peninsula being a separate ward that didn't meet the numbers because of the difference and because of the isolation. And just looking at Littleton, Littleton is separated from the city by a tunnel which connects it to the city when it's open, but there are times when that tunnel's closed. At the time when the tunnel is closed, Littleton is connected to the city by two reasonably high passes, one of which goes through Sumner and the other of which comes over the top of Kashmir, both of which are subject to adverse weather events. It's timely to reflect on the isolation of the more far-flung parts of the peninsula. Again, just looking at events of the last couple of days, we had State Highway 75 underwater at Little River, but actually closed from Birdlings Flat right the way through to Barry's Bay. There is no alternative route. And whilst that was a couple of days ago, there are plenty of other examples of when that road or parts of it have been closed because of ice, snow, rockfall, or wet weather events. So, putting the arguments that the peninsula is an isolated community, you've only got to look at Littleton and Governor's Bay to see that it is quite separate from the city in terms of isolation. It would take you over an hour to drive from here to Hilltop, and if you stood at Hilltop and looked over the Akaroa Harbour, you've still got another half hour's drive down to Akaroa, probably 45 minutes or an hour to the furthest parts of the peninsula you can see at that time. I think that pretty much defines isolation. So we heard resoundingly from the people of the peninsula that they agree with the initial proposal. And I think what we see on the ground and in real life, particularly for people that travel to and from the peninsula, supports what we heard in the submissions.
Sarah?
Thank you. I get why people of Banks Peninsula have submitted, mainly from the Akaroa area, to stay an isolated community. But isolation means quite a different thing in 2021 than it did at the time of amalgamation. And we heard from quite a few submitters about the use of technology, which has ramped up hugely over the last year and has led to a much more connected but digitally society. And that takes away a lot of the necessity for the face-to-face in a lot of occasions. And we have had people submitting and connecting with us at various times via Zoom. Over the next 6 years before the next representation review, this is likely to increase, and it will be much better quality, I am sure, with the advent of all sorts of new technologies. One submitter actually framed it really, really nicely. They didn't look at Banks Peninsula being subsumed into the urban, but the potential for a small slice of the urban to join with Banks Peninsula to make up the numbers so that people weren't overrepresented. And I think that's a much better way of framing the conversation. And I would think that this would be the last representation review where this council puts forward a proposal to keep Banks Peninsula as an isolated community. I would think in 6 years' time that simply won't make sense. Doesn't stop me debating. But I think that that's what will happen. Thanks.
Thank you. I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried, and abstentions recorded. Thank you. Number of community boards. I'll move that we confirm the initial proposal that there be 6 communities represented by 6 community boards.
Second.
Seconded by Jimmy Chen. Any questions for staff? Any? Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. Can you just highlight the logic of how the Linwood Central Heathcote Board was chosen as the odd one out?
Yeah, the logic was covered in the initial report to council on the 11th of March. So from memory, the Linwood Central Heathcote was chosen because it had the minimal impact on all the other boards. So it kept the essential superstructure of all other boards together. Then secondly, the process involved a survey of approximately 3,000 people, 940 responses. The responses were around communities of interest and what parts of town, geographically representative, a sample of the community affiliated with, and that very much supported the proposed change, aggregation of wards into boards. So I think probably, for example, we could refresh your memory on the view of the southeast of Christchurch, which very strongly supported the aggregation of Heathcote, Spraydon and Cashmere. So without rereading the report, that's a summary of why.
It just doesn't. I presume you're referring to these little diagrams, and it's really hard to actually understand how the arguments being put forward by the communities have been considered. Maybe it's the way that this information is presented, but it's certainly not clear as to why. Yeah. I mean, you could say that about any board that was chosen, that the others won't be disrupted. So
I suppose, again, going back to the report, and in answer to your question, not entering a debate, conscious of that, the process involved from memory, about 8 or 9 different aggregations. Those aggregations were workshopped with community boards, with council on a number of occasions. And a number of questions were asked at those times. So that may be relevant. It may not be.
The other issue that I recall, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the increased population to the southwest is a major factor in terms of where numbers can shift from and to. Was that part of the consideration?
Not for community boards.
Yeah, not so much in that all the wards have to be plus or minus 10%, but it was one of the primary factors influencing the overall approach. That was the biggest population change that this representation review had to deal with. So indirectly, that underpinned everything.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded.
There are a number of submissions that raise concern about a community board having the greatest area of social deprivation and need. Have you considered any proposals to address that in the resolutions? Like you've heard from one submitter, for example, concern at having to travel to New Brighton for the service centre.
Yanni, we've already heard that the location of the service centres is not something that has been in any way decided, and that will be a matter it will be a matter for the chief executive once the decision is finally made, and that won't be until next year. So it's not a matter for our consideration today.
I just think in
do
terms
not make assumptions that anything is going to remain exactly where and how it is provided at the moment.
Yeah, I just think in terms of responding to the submissions, it's good just to record
We
that.
are required to respond to the submissions, and we will be responding to the submissions. The organisation will. All right, so I'll now open it up for debate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. 2 abstentions, 1 voted no. Yanni Johansson. The next item is the names of the community boards. And it is to confirm the names as set out in the initial proposal. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Phil Major, sorry. Are there any questions? Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. And abstentions? The next one is to confirm its initial proposal that the current Linwood Central Heathcote community is abolished and the Linwood Central and Heathcote wards are united with other communities. I'll move that, and it's seconded by Sam McDonald. Any questions? Yanni? Debate. Yanni?
Again, I just don't think that if we were responding to the submissions that were made, I think the community submissions certainly haven't been responded to in regards to this one. And it was interesting to hear people saying, well, the majority were in favour of the peninsula being an isolated community. From my reading of the submissions, actually, there were a number that wanted this board retained and struggled to understand the logic with what was proposed in terms of the community boards. So I thought that there were really good submissions that were made to the full council, raising a number of those concerns. But I'll just quote you from one of the submitters who said, "We strongly feel that this proposal has been designed solely with numbers in mind, lines on a map, but it entirely lacks the nuance and recognition of the community and the feelings of belonging of the members of our community." So I find it really sad that this council is rejecting the submissions that people made to this process. There's a number of other submissions that people also made where they struggled to get the information around what was proposed. But certainly if you look at the dotted diagrams, you don't, in my view, you don't see clearly a desire to justify the current proposal. Certainly, especially in that eastern part of the city through Woolston and Bromley, for example, I don't believe that mapping exercise shows that people wanted to go with what's being proposed. So I strongly disagree with this proposal. This board has a long history in this local community. And just to conclude, just to emphasise that Ferry Road, and again, this is in the submissions, Ferry Road is seen as a connector of communities rather than a divider. And that's ideally what the community board boundaries, did in terms of this board. So I feel really sad that this board is being abolished. Again, this is a community that some parts of this community lost a lot with the earthquake. And I can't see the clear justification for getting rid of this community board in our proposal, so I won't be supporting it.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. So Mike Davidson and Yanni Johansson, abstention. Sarah Templeton. Boundaries of community board areas and subdivisions. So I'll move the initial proposal that communities continue to be subdivided for electoral purposes as follows, and that's all set out there, seconded by Pauline. Are there any questions? Is there any debate? I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And no to Yanni. Are you 2 abstentions? Yeah, 2 abstentions. And then we move to the yeah. What have I done?
Number 14 next.
I actually thought we'd done that.
Community boards.
Oh, sorry. That was 12 that I moved and seconded. Okay, right.
Oh, yes.
So now we're up to 13. My apologies. I voted on this one last time, but no difference. Right. So, sorry. Oh, all right. Pauline moved, seconded by Tim. Any questions? Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Composition of metropolitan community boards. Oh yeah, confirms the 5 urban community boards comprising 9 members each. So I will move that, seconded by Jimmy Chen. Any questions? Any discussion? Yanni?
Yeah, thanks. Obviously, I won't be supporting this. I just encourage councillors to recall the submission from the community board, the Linwood Central Heathcote Community Board, which I think the verbal submission said that really communities felt like this was being done to them rather than with them. So, you know, I feel, especially if you, again, just read the submissions from people in this area, that doing this to a community rather than with them is not the right approach, and I will not be voting for it.
Okay. I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Abstentions? Yes? Are you abstaining? Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Okay. And so that was Yanni opposed. Yeah. Composition of Banks Peninsula Community Board. I'll move that. Seconded Andrew. Yeah. Any questions? Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Final note. I'll move that we accept or reject each submission received accordingly. Do I have a seconder? Tim? Any questions? Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried. Opposed, Yanni. So, there's an additional motion moved by, sorry? Yeah. Moved by Councillor Templeton and seconded by Councillor Davidson, which requests staff prepare a report to the council by the end of 2021 on holding a poll alongside 2022 local government election on the electoral system, single transferable vote, SDV or first past the post FPP to be used at the 2025 and 2028 elections. I'm ruling that in order for debate, and I will hand it over to Councillor Templeton to move it. Do you need? Well, it's an amendment from councillors, so council staff may or may not be able to assist. Okay, all right. So, question, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. With regards to options, so that would be really setting up for the 2025 election. Could we? This is proposing, say, two options. First past the post STV. Is it possible to put other options there? Because if we're talking about, as proposed, about true democracy, so we could put up more than just the two options.
It may be the wrong staff that are sitting at the table.
Joe, could you come to the table?
This is the Local Electoral Act, and so there is a limitation on what you can use. There are two systems, but STV and First Past the Post, and they're the only two systems under the Act. So, but I know that because I know that. I think it would be good if we heard that from staff who are the legal staff and our electoral officer.
So my question is then, how many options are we able to go out to the public with if we are after true democracy, supposedly, if proposed?
Those two.
So
those are the only two options open for voting in local government elections.
So can I ask why STV is the only other option?
It's in the Act.
We're probably not the people to ask. It's in the legislation.
It's in the legislation. The Local Electoral Act says the two options. Aaron?
Yeah, so Joe, it's just a couple of numbers questions. Does a percentage of the population, like currently I think last time we had 42% of the population vote, does a percentage have to vote to make it pass, and is it 51% and then that's the system?
Because we're currently, and please interrupt me if I've got this wrong, because the council currently uses, well, it's a poll. There's only two options. So whichever, if there was a poll held, whichever had the most votes, there isn't a percentage to reach, would be the successful outcome.
And there's no number of the population that needs to vote to trigger it. So essentially you could have a 10% turnout and that could swing our voting system.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, it's no threshold. It's like a first past the post poll. It's 50% of those who vote, and there's no minimum number of people who have to vote.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Yanni.
Just trying to understand how this relates to the representation review. Given, like, for example, I was keen to get a resolution in response to submissions around the inequity of resources with the proposed changes, and that's been ruled out of order. So can I just be clear what we can and can't do as part of responding to submissions?
Yanni, this requests staff to prepare a report to the council for the way of a conducting of an election, which will not be before 2025. So
no, that's fine. So, for example, could I move that we request staff prepare a report on the funding implications of the new proposed community board structure?
No, excuse me. We are at the moment, we are dealing with the amendment a resolution that is in front of the council that has been notified to me prior, and I have taken advice on, and I have ruled it in order. If you want to make a resolution to the council, there is a proper process for doing so. And if you want to, we're coming to the end of the meeting, so this is the last item that I have on the agenda.
Yeah, no, I was just under the impression that we could only do within the scope of what we had. So I was just trying to get an understanding of how we can pass this resolution in the scope of the agenda.
I've accepted that this is relevant to people who made submissions on the representation review, who asked for the single transferable voting, and when they understood that it was not possible in the time frame that we are in now, they asked that we consider it for the future. We can't make the decision to go to a poll now because we would need a report that would provide advice. So the question that is in front of us is whether staff are requested to prepare a report to council to signal an intention to hold a poll alongside the election next year. And the advantage of obviously holding it next year is that the turnout is connected to the to the election, and it will become a campaign issue. We've got people who've come here campaigning today, so just acknowledging that. But if we want a better turnout for the election, then there's a whole stack of people out there saying that they want to do. So no, your proposal is not in order. So are there any other technical questions for staff? Melanie?
This is thinking into the years that this is referring to, 2025 and 2028. If the Future for Local Government reform occurs and this council, or the layout or structure of councils in New Zealand changes, how does the voting or electoral system, would that have to be looked at that point?
Quite possibly. This is a decision under the legislation we've got currently. If there's changes to legislation or that things are to apply to it, we'd need to get advice with regard to that, and I suspect it would be nationally related.
Yeah. I mean, there'll always be transitional provisions in the legislation to set out how things will occur if there's a change from a big review like that.
Mm-hmm. So the report would need to signal the issue of Future for Local Government and any advice at the time.
Yeah. So, those are the questions. I'll open it up for debate. Okay.
And look, I won't take long. Actually, I guess I was a little bit disappointed this morning when we met, and it sounded like this was already a foregone conclusion. But look, and I'm not going to debate the benefits of STV. You know, it's an electoral system that elects people who best represent the values of the voting community. As that's not actually what we're here to talk about today. That's not what this resolution is about. We have major issues facing us at the moment. Now, they're the same major issues that have been facing us for some time now. And it's actually possible that the use of the FPP electoral system has actually just ensured the continuation of status quo. To ensure we best represent our community and our city, we actually need to look at our electoral system to ensure it's fit for purpose as we do enter a critical stage of shaping our city's future. So that should actually be seen as a high priority. There is no progress without change. This resolution has come on the back of submissions requesting we change our current voting system. There have been changes made to this review on the back of just one submission. So it surprises me that we're going to see councillors voting against this just for asking for information so they can have an informed decision. And this is on the back of a lot of submissions. Today's request is simply that, asking for information so we can make an informed decision on whether we should have a poll with the people of Christchurch on the electoral system that they will use. It is not telling them we're going to be using it, it's asking them what electoral system do they want to use. And I'm just not sure why councillors will be against a sensible approach to a valid concern that was raised by significant people that submitted on the representation review. I'll be voting yes, so I can have information to make an informed decision. If we have elected members who refuse to even accept information, we will never see progress.
Melanie?
Just very quickly, to me, because I'm not sure what the Future for Local Government is going to be, it seems to me it would be best to wait until that time and then work out what our electoral system is if there's going to be any changes. So I wouldn't support doing a report at this time, but I would in the future when we know what the future will hold.
Aaron?
Yeah, I'll be supporting this. I've got no issue with how we vote. I don't have a personal preference myself, but I am keen to hear what the public think and whether it engages more people. Will we get better elected members? Don't know. May do, may not. We may get more people vote, we may not. But we should at least give the voting public the choice of what they and how they vote for their elected members. I won't speak quite as sternly as Mike. I don't see I've got a future as a headmaster or a teacher.
Anne?
Yes, thank you. I agree with Mike. I think that it's important that we get the feedback from our community, to give the information about this. But the wording that's been presented to us here kind of suggests that we're going to do it. And I would like to know the advantages and disadvantages of both systems. And I would like a report to outline those things. And even to look at the history of this and the past, because I know that I've had some good information sent through about past moves to get this through. We have the experience, obviously, of other examples where this system is used, and it seems to cause a lot of confusion for people. So I'm very open to having the information to make the decision, but to me, what we've been presented with here doesn't actually suggest that.
No, I'm not going to do that. I want to enter the debate. So the issue for me is that we didn't take a long time to consider this matter in time for it to be looked at for this election. We need to get ahead of the game as a council and receive the information. So the information is core critical. I mean, staff are being asked here to prepare a report on, the sensibleness of if you're going to hold a poll, when would be the best time to hold it? When there is nothing else being asked for by way of a view, or when you've got a contest around a council election. Everyone knows that a referendum that's held in conjunction with an election always produces a better turnout than one that's conducted on its own. And the other thing is that when you look at the two referenda that were held last year with the central government election, I think that the outcome of the two results was predicated on the basis of what happened first. With the death was the dignity, I can't remember what, the euthanasia, the voluntary euthanasia bill. With that, it had been to a select committee. We'd heard all of the public debates. We'd had people making submissions. We'd heard all of the issues. With the marijuana one, which God only knows how that came out the way that it did, except for it didn't go to select committee. And so there were things in the bill that people were going, oh, no, that's not quite what I wanted. You didn't have all of the public discussion with all of the experts. I mean, to me, it's obvious. So what we want is get in early, get a report, get all of the facts. How does first past the post work? How does SDV work? What is a system that actually does produce a fairer system? I was a huge supporter of MMP before we had MMP. I got elected. I'm so old. I got elected under first past the post twice, and then under MMP. And I just think that we have to be open to this way of voting. I probably wouldn't have supported it before, and the reason I wouldn't have supported it before is that the DHB one was so confusing for people. This is different. It's a smaller number for each of the wards, 2 or 3 candidates. But no, there were seven required, and that usually produced at least 30 candidates. So it didn't work so well. So I urge people to support this. Tim.
Thank you. It's surprising that people find it hard, as mentioned, to find the information, because we live in a world that's full of information on the internet and Google, etc. Whether it's the right and truthful information is another thing. But when I first got elected, there were 6 independents and 2 people's choice. So to say that that likelihood of there only be a few, it's irrelevant. It could be actually 9, could be 12. You just don't know. If we're going to really open it up, it could be open to the whole ward or wards. I think it would be really, I will support this because I think that however this comes out, I hope that it puts whatever to bed, because it's all about the people. It's not about us. It's not about political favouritism about systems. It's about the people. And as long as we do not, and all of us do not forget about that, that is the most important thing. So I hope that if we do this and there is a referendum and they do decide one or the other, although I do think there should be a number of options, because there are other groups that would like other options, that we stick by it, stop moaning about it, and just get on and serve the people we represent.
Andrew.
Thank you. This isn't about what voting system we use in 2025. It's about when we consider which voting system we use in 2025. And clearly some views have been expressed that people think it's a good thing that we might do that at the same time as we consider who we're going to vote for in the 2022 election, and at the same time as we consider the big issues that we rightly should be considering at that time, issues of climate change, environment, transport, urban design, financial strategy, all of those big things that we want people to be focused on as we vote in 2022. Yes, there is the opportunity. There was, in fact, the opportunity for this council to decide to hold a poll on STV, and we decided not to do that. There will be the opportunity, quite rightly, for the next council to decide whether to hold a poll on the 2025 election, 4.5 years away, which would still land in the same place as the process that this decision would start. I do not want the 2022 election and its big issues to be clouded by a campaign on what voting system we're going to use 3 years later. I think that deserves its own debate, and I think that can be done at a separate time than the 2022 election, because I've been subject to phone calls and emails on both sides of the STV debate in the last couple of days, and I acknowledge the people in the chamber today and the people who made submissions on this as part of what we heard on the representation review. But to do justice to that argument, I don't think conflating it with the big issues that we all need to be discussing as part of the 2022 election is the right time or the right way to do that. Yes, it deserves consideration, but separate consideration that does it justice, as those big issues for the 2022 election also deserve full consideration without being eclipsed, taken over, superseded, clouded by what really is a different discussion. So I'm all for it, but I'm not all for talking about it at the same time as the 2022 election issues.
Anyone else? Jimmy, Chen, and then Yanni.
Turn the mic on, please.
You made a good point.
Oh, yeah, okay, thank you, yeah. I'm concerned is the local government election, you run to the improvement. It's not only for the what kind of system, etc. We are all aware. The central government and the Crown, recently they have invited 5 independent panel review how to improve the local government structure, etc. And also interim report. I'm aware possibly will be by the end of this year, and also after another 1.5 years, they have to formal report to the government, to the cabinet. I believe, whether what kind of system, FPP, STV, or some other system, they will be there the part of the improvement, and also in that time, possibly all those the local council probably has significant structural change. So I agree with Andrew mentioned earlier. Next year, the local government election, we should focus on the public service, those issues like public transport, like climate change, or like water, the free water. This one should be our focal point, rather than what kind of the election system for the further the 3 years. Particularly, the central government already to dedicate those 5 independent panel. They were to interview, and they were to be go to every the local council to interview from those local council, maybe from those the relevant the community as well. So we should integrate resources for the community, for the public service, rather than just consider what kind of election system. It's my view.
Yanni?
Yeah, I think it's quite ironic, really, that after the last local body election, as the councillor who had the lowest voted turnout in the Linwood ward, out of any ward in the city, that councillors didn't support doing any work on voter turnout, and that was ruled out of order. This timing around this is wrong, but actually the principle is really good. We should be, as a council, looking at why people choose to either vote or not vote. We should be looking at how we get diverse representation around the council and the community board tables. And we should actually be looking at the boundaries and the representation review at the same time as the voting system. But instead, we leave things so late that we get told we can't do one because we've already done the other, or vice versa. So I think actually the idea of getting the information is sensible, but I think there's a number of questions that we should also be concerning ourselves with, and not just raising this now because we've had a few submissions, but actually thinking about previous research that we've done into why people choose to vote and what gets them into a habit of voting. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen, but I can't see why getting a report should be anything that we're worried about. I have real concerns about holding a poll alongside the local government election, but I think that shouldn't stop us from getting information to consider what is the best way of understanding or enabling the communities to participate in local government in our city. We've got massive negative results in the latest residents survey. So we need to look at something, and I'm really open-minded to what the best system is, but I do know the current system of having separate processes for separate decisions that are connected to each other is a really silly one. So I can see no reason to not get the report. If there's concerns in that report, then I think that's the opportunity for councillors to express that.
Right, Sarah, close the debate. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thanks, everyone. We've spent many hours considering boundary changes and their flow-on impacts, and a single submission has led to multiple changes and discussion around the table. Today, we also need to show that we've listened to those 24 submitters who asked us to consider STV as a voting system, and asking for a report so that we can make that decision is a sensible way to respond to those requests. We're facing huge issues as a city, and the issue of resident engagement in council processes is actually the biggest one of them. And we heard that loud and clear in our resident survey discussion this morning in the council meeting. We cannot face the other challenges that our city faces, such as climate change, without an engaged community. Talking about our electoral processes during an election at a time when people are more interested than normal is the best way to get a conversation going, and should not be seen as a distraction from any political ambitions. And I'm sorry, Mel, but if we always wait around for future changes that the government may or may not make, we will never make any progress. I would rather make a choice than be done to. And the wording for today's resolution is actually from staff, and it's a change from the one that was originally sent through. It is designed to give us a report to make an informed decision about whether we have a poll. The Hamilton City Council recently decided to switch to STV and ran a really effective information and education campaign ahead of a standard community consultation. Their community were really supportive and are looking forward to the change in 2022. Andrew, those really big issues you talked about need an engaged community to deal with them, and we never decided not to progress with STV. We gave guidance in a workshop that it shouldn't even be a report for decision. If we had made a decision earlier, we could have gone out for a standard, normal consultation process, not a formal poll. And we could have had a very simple, straightforward decision much earlier in the process, in time to enable a discussion on the representation review and multi-member wards. Rather than clouding the issue, this is going to bring clarity. The most progressive and democratic electoral system is for multi-member wards with STV. We are not actually able to make both of these decisions at the same time due to the various processes we are handed down, but that should not stop us making them separately. The Local Government Commission may yet decide that we are elected at large, and it would be good for us to have this conversation with our community lined up at the same time. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. I mean, it's probably easier just to do a poll, do a division. Aye.
I can't hear anything.
Can you hear us?
Now.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're voting at the moment. Oh, you are. Would you like to give your vote?
Oh. Yes. And the vote is yes as well.
Councillor Davidson? Aye. Councillor Galloway? No. Councillor Goff? No. Councillor Johansson? Yes. Councillor Kewen? Yes. Councillor McDonald? No. Councillor Major? No. Councillor McClellan? No. Councillor Scandrett?
Yes.
Councillor Templeton? Yes. That's 7 in favour and 10 against.
That is lost. So thank you all. I will now move that standing orders previously suspended be resumed. Seconded by Sarah. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried. This I don't think we had. James, could you do a karakia whakamutunga from? Yeah. Can you do that?
Parklands.
Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Aye, we'll do it over the interweb.
Yep.
I'm just talking about all of our korero is finished, and we are heading on our journeys to our next meetings or homes maybe. So I say ka whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia tūruki whakatā ai, home e huie.
Tai kia. Kia ora, and thank you very much, and I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Look forward to that debate again.